Order! Order! You are an incorrigible delinquent at times. Behave yourself, man!
Five minutes after 11 is the time. Right, do you remember our brilliant conversation about Bitcoin last week, at the end of which everybody listening understood what Bitcoin was, but I was still absolutely clueless? You remember that? Yeah. I'd like to do the same now with something called net neutrality, which is a decision I would not have taken a few years ago, because, you know, there was a time not that long ago, and I'd be sitting here wondering whether anybody listening would understand the issue that I was about to discuss, because A, there weren't that many people listening, and B, somewhat arrogantly, if I can't understand it, if I haven't got a Scooby-Doo what's going on, then with a relatively small audience, there isn't that much hope that somebody listening would know what was going on. That, I appear, one of these days I'm going to come a cropper. I would suggest now that we are way, way, way beyond those fears. There's, you know, 1 million people a week tuning into the programme, and everyone who listens would agree, the most informed and clever and articulate callers you've heard on any phone-in programme in the history of radio. So I'm going to go all in on it. I don't know what net neutrality is. I just have a sneaking suspicion that what happened in America yesterday is quite a big deal. What happened in America yesterday, James? Well, they voted to abolish it, I think. And there is the sum total of my understanding of this subject. Okay? So give me a call. Tell me what's going on. Actually, I'll give you another line. I think that it is designed, and I'm sure that Trump's people have passed it off as something else, like they're passing off the tax bill as somehow being good for ordinary people, where it contains enormous tax breaks for people inheriting large estates, for people who own private jets, and the small sections of the middle class will see a slight reduction in their tax burden, haven't read or probably won't read on to the next paragraph where it puts a time limit on it, at the end of which all the money reverts back to the people who've already got the most. I mean, it's, as a piece of legislation, it's absolutely magnificent for billionaires and not really for anybody else. But I presume they've sold net neutrality in a similar way, and it got abolished yesterday, I think. And I grope towards the conclusion that it in some way will link your wealth to your internet use. Now, you could say it's already linked, but it's only linked in the loosest of senses, in that if you can afford internet access, then we're all pretty much on a similar level. I know fibre optics, that's more geography than money. But even if there were slight variances in you know, if you could pay 50 quid a month and you got something better than what someone paying 20 quid a month got, the gap wouldn't really justify the price. You'd have to need it for your business, or you'd need super, super, super fast. I'm now completely out of my comfort zone already by saying super, super, super fast. But well, look, here's what I do. If it's been brought in by Trump and cheered by his supporters, who routinely have absolutely no idea what they're cheering for, but somehow remain seduced by the strange orange phantom, then it's probably going to be bad for them if they're poor, and good for very rich people. That's just my general, that's the slide rule that I bring to any discussion of American politics that I don't fully understand. It's probably designed to give the wealth even more privilege compared to the less wealthy. Let's find out. 0345 6060 973, and that is pretty much all I've got. So if you understand net neutrality and you want to talk about it, if you want to defend what happened in America yesterday, or indeed unpick it, then this is the place to do it. The number you need remains the same. Of course, I only say it when I've got a couple of phone lines free, so there are, needless to say, a couple free now. 0345 6060 973 is the number that you need. We'll crack on with that imminently. I can't have too many people, even if you all agree with each other, because frankly, if you all agree with each other, then I will end the conversation a little bit more confident that I now understand what the issue actually is. At the moment, it's fair to say I don't. One thing I do understand is the beauty of the Christmas round robin. This is an annual tradition that we are launching today, 9 minutes after 11. And the beauty of the Christmas round robin is that it allows us to have a little festive chuckle, which isn't really at anybody else's expense. And even if it is, it's people who probably deserve to be chuckled at just a tiny bit. Don't start splitting hairs on what a round robin actually is, or what the pedantic description of what we're discussing should be, you know what I'm talking about. I am talking about the photocopied or printed letter or diary almost that goes in a Christmas card that you get, and this is quite an important distinction, although I won't exclude you completely if you fall foul of it, from people you don't really know that well. Like maybe from some people you met on holiday in Abu Dhabi 14 years ago. And you still exchange Christmas cards, but their Christmas card always contains an account of their year. And you are brought fully up to speed with the state of Uncle Sid's bunions. You know now that grandson Charlie has got 2 CSEs and an MVQ in woodwork. You are delighted to discover that the Open University degree undertaken by Ethel has secured a first. You know exactly what I mean. The tomato crop this year has been exceptional, although I have to say my parsnips weren't really up to sniff. And the combination of the charming banality of what's in the round robin and the borderline anonymity of the people that have sent it to you conspire to create a lovely Christmas tradition on this programme. So if you've got one, what you need to do, or if you get one in the next week, because I'm here till Friday, try the veal. If you get one in the course of the next week, you just need to highlight some of the dullest, but you know what I mean by dull. The bits that are dull and funny. You need to highlight those bits and ring in and just give us a little bit of, ideally, again, it's up to you what you do, but ideally we'll get a little bit of insight into who sent it to you, and then we will hear some of the choicest morsels. So if you've got a Christmas round robin replete with the most charmingly banal information about people you've either never met or can barely remember, then get in touch now. I've done it the wrong way round, so I've now got a flipping switchboard full of callers waiting to talk about net neutrality, which means no one's going to be able to get through about the round robins. So hold your horses, and I'll give you a heads up. We've already had one call from Dublin. That's the power of Twitter, because I launched it on Twitter earlier. If you don't follow me on Twitter, you're missing out on all these special bonuses and director's features. It's practically a red button for the programme. At Mr. James OB is the handle you need. So we've already got one in the locker, which will provide, hopefully, a bit of an insight into what we're looking for. If you already know what we're looking for, then wait until I've spoken to Dan and Mike about net neutrality and then ring in with your round robin. Should we take a call before the 1:15 break? Shall we do that? Shall we be crazy kids? We might as well do the show right. Yeah, let's do it!
Does this bother you? What if you had to pay to make it go away? We often assume that all the information on the internet is equally accessible. It's not quite as simple as that, but this ideal is the basis of net neutrality. It's an issue that's been on the agenda in the US for years, but it actually affects people all over the world. Here's the problem. Without net neutrality, your internet service provider, or ISP, such as BT or Comcast, could influence what you see and how quickly you see it. In order for you to watch YouTube, browse Facebook, or read the news, you need an ISP to connect you to that content. Net neutrality demands that ISPs should treat all web traffic the same. Let's think about that in terms of real traffic. The ISPs are like the road between Tech City, where companies like Amazon and Google are based, and Consumerville, where you live. These companies have to send information along the road, which is owned by the ISP. Currently, vehicles from Google and vehicles from a small company travel on the same road at the same speed. The ISP cannot favor one over the other, so the Google van cannot overtake its competitor's little car. But imagine the road is converted into a highway with a fast and slow lane. To access the fast lane, companies have to pay the ISP more money. This favors big companies who can afford to pay. Some companies might even be denied access to the road altogether. It would be the ISP's choice. Without net neutrality, the ISP highway has stopped treating all traffic the same. What does this mean for you? Well, without net neutrality, you might find some services slow down unless your favorite sites pay the ISPs. This has happened before. In 2014, before net neutrality regulations were enshrined in law in the US, Comcast customers noticed Netflix streaming speeds plummeting. It wasn't until Netflix agreed to pay Comcast more money that streaming speeds shot up again. It could also lead to higher prices for you. ISPs could charge premium prices for people who want to watch a video or listen to music at peak times. And if companies are forced to pay for the fast lane, the price increase might be pushed back onto the consumer. That means you could end up paying more to browse your favorite sites. You might even notice a decrease in the quality of content. While larger companies can afford to pay up for better service delivery, smaller companies may not be able to keep up. Less competition means less pressure to improve products and services. And if smaller companies fold, the consumer will have less choice. ISPs could choose to slow down content of any kind. Let's take the business of streaming video. If Netflix makes an arrangement with an ISP, the ISP could block Netflix's competitors from reaching customers. Many ISPs have started their own streaming services. They could favor their own content and block competitors out completely. And it's not just about business. They could also censor content that they disagree with. ISPs argue that if there was less regulation and they were able to charge a premium for faster service, they could reinvest the money in better infrastructure. This could include improved access for people in remote and rural areas. If popular services like YouTube are putting more strain on the ISP's network, it makes sense for them to pay more anyway. Right? But YouTube would say it's not their job to improve the internet, just as it's not BMW's job to build better roads. What's more, many argue that any extra money paid to ISPs would really just go into the pockets of shareholders. One thing's certain, net neutrality creates a level playing field which spurs innovation. Small companies can easily challenge competitors, which motivates them both to improve their products. Small startups have a fighting chance to grow and even surpass their big rivals. That's how Facebook rose from humble origins in Mark Zuckerberg's university dorm room to domination over market leader MySpace. ISPs also argue that any consumers who don't like the way they operate can always choose to switch providers. But it's not that simple. Many people only have access to adequate broadband from one internet provider in their area. Without net neutrality, that one ISP could have a lot of control over what those consumers get to see online. So what do you think? Should net neutrality rules be protected, loosened a little, or even scrapped altogether?
Dan's in Croydon. Net neutrality. Dan, what's going on?
Hello, mate.
Hello, Dan.
This is going to be hard to do in 2 minutes.
God, you're such a diva.
In short...
Yes. We can go a bit late. We can go to the break a bit late.
Can we? Okay.
Well, not really, but yeah, we usually do.
I'll do my best.
Go on, then.
So, at the moment, when you get a contract with an ISP, you get access to all of the internet with it, pretty much.
Yeah.
If you think about Sky or Virgin or any other broadcast television provider in the same way, when you pay for Virgin, you get some of the channels that Virgin provide, and if you want the other extra nice channels that they've got, you pay extra. Net neutrality, the repeal of that, allows the ISPs to do the same thing with access to websites. So an ISP could sell you a package where you've got access to Google and Facebook, but you don't have access to Twitter, and you've got to pay an extra $5.99 a month for that.
To Twitter?
Yeah. It's just an example. It's not a concrete...
No, I know, but the money would go to the people providing the content online.
It would probably be split between the service provider and the people providing. So
well, this is terrifying.
Yes, absolutely. It's horrendous. It's not what anybody in the IT industry who really understands how the internet works wants.
Which is why it's perfect for a Donald Trump administration to force through, because they are the fuel in their tank is people who don't really understand what they're doing.
Absolutely.
And it's good news for...
I don't know. It's good news for unethical ISPs.
And billionaire tech providers.
Well, if I don't see how it's going to be a benefit for people like Twitter or Facebook, though, because... they're just going to lose customers. They're going to lose people that use it because they're not going to be able to afford the packages to get at it.
Wow, I often feel that people who have the pleasure of following my Twitter feed should be paying for the privilege. Could this be a way in which I get to see a piece of the action? I do some of my best work on Twitter, Dan.
You do.
So could this lead to me getting paid for my brilliant tweets by volume or quantity or quality?
Doubt that very much.
Oh, well, I'm just looking for a silver lining.
Yeah.
The Federal Communications Commission voted on Thursday to dismantle these rules, and your very beautifully delivered simplification of the whole subject is that it will mean broadband companies can charge Americans specifically according to what they access. And is there any way that the rest of the world could resist it then?
The trouble is, it's all done through peering agreements. So it means, the internet, there isn't an overriding company that makes the internet, rules the internet, or keeps it going.
No.
It's all done by agreement by the different network controllers in different countries. So it's all down to whether or not they talk to each other and come up with ways to...
What do you think?
I hope that net neutrality remains the norm outside of America, and it means that...
It sounds like a really big deal, because I was reading some coverage about a week ago that was telling everyone to calm down, it's not that big a deal, but it's hard to remember where these days, isn't it?
Yeah, and it's also made worse by the fact that a lot of the services and servers, although they may be American in name, they're not necessarily in America.
So, if I were to speculate wildly on this, in fact, actually, I'm nicking a tweet off Andy Powell, so I shouldn't pass it off as my own work. He writes, imagine a situation where the poor could only afford to access the right, brackets or left, brackets, wing press. Mm-hmm. Is that part of it?
Yeah, that could happen.
But would that involve the non-fake news, like, you know, the New York Times, CNN, NBC? They would have to choose to charge, or will they have that choice taken away by the internet service providers? I think we've got an hour on this, but I won't keep you here for the whole time. Do you see what I mean?
That's not clear to me at this point.
Okay.
I understand what you're asking.
Yeah.
And I don't know where the line gets drawn, because it only happened yesterday, and I guess all of this stuff has still got to be talked about.
But it looks like control of information, doesn't it?
Absolutely. That's what it's about.
And that is, of
and
course,
making money.
Which is probably what motivates Donald Trump, the making money side of it, but the fascistic playbook that he seems to be slavishly following would have control of information, which is weird because the state of the internet at the moment and the fact that his mate Alex Jones... these are the observations that I make occasionally and then just sit back and sort of go, hey? Because when Donald Trump talks about fake news in the context of proper journalism, he then credits Alex Jones, this InfoWars fella who sells brain juice to his followers. Even that sounds like a joke. He credits him with being a reliable source. And he believes it was the anniversary of the Sandy Hook massacre yesterday. I didn't realise that the dates of that and Grenfell Tower coincided. But he contends that the Sandy Hook massacre was a hoax and that all of the grieving parents are actors in the pay of the hoaxers. So you have a president of America who would describe Woodward and Bernstein as fake news, and a man who claims that a massacre in a school was undertaken as a hoax and a fraud is reliable. And these are the moments where I naively presumed a couple of years ago that if I just say something like that out loud, then anybody who thinks Trump is anything other than a complete charlatan is gonna realise that they're wrong to like him. He denigrates proper journalists and celebrates a man who tells grieving parents that they are hoaxers and fakes, and he's president. So when that little nugget of information doesn't solicit a unanimous agreement that the man's a monster, when there are still people going, yeah, but, you know, but MAGA, or whatever it is, that's when you cannot overestimate the impact of anything that the man does. You cannot just presume that he is in any way constrained by the parameters of decency or normalcy. I look at this, and it's a decision not taken by him, but it's a decision taken very much by the Federal Communications Commission, onto which presumably he's made appointments. Because during Obama's administration, the net neutrality was put in place, and what they did yesterday was vote to remove it, giving broadband companies the power to reshape Americans' online experiences. We need to find out more about this. 19 after 11 is the time. Dan, thank you. The question is a simple one. Net neutrality is a complicated issue that I don't fully understand, but given that the Trump administration has just reversed something brought in by the Obama administration, it seems to me a no-brainer that it is going to be to the detriment of ordinary people and to the benefit of the already wealthy. I am, however, persuadable from that position. Malcolm's in the city. Malcolm, what can you tell us?
Mark, sorry, James, I was dozing off there.
Put that in a clip. Make that the advert. I can't carry on with this conversation. That's the worst review I've had in years.
Oh, no.
Go on. What can you tell us?
Let me try and help you. No, well, first of all, let me just say that this is probably the largest global cartel, the telecoms cartel, second only to the banking cartel, thrashing to try and preserve itself in tomorrow's world. The example I give, and I've been for sort of 20 years been talking about this and trying to get people to understand and to see how critically important net neutrality is.
Yeah.
Can I just take you back in history? I mean, imagine at the time when, after the country got covered with canals all over the place, suddenly some entrepreneur comes up with a mad idea of a steam engine, George Stephenson, and says, hey, look, you know, we can do things better by having steam engines. And the canal industry, if it had been regulated by the FCC,
yeah,
or there probably would have been an Office of Canals Operation and Management, Ofcom, they would have gone and consulted everybody, including the canal owners, including the horse owners, including the barge manufacturers, and they said, hey, what are we going to do about this wacky, disruptive technology called a steam engine? And they'd have looked at it, and they'd have come up with a report, and they'd have concluded that the best thing to do was to lay railway lines up the side of all the canals, get rid of the horses, and put trains on them.
Mate, I was confused. Malcolm, I was confused before you started talking.
Are you listening, James?
To every syllable, my friend. But my goodness me, I've got canals, I've got towpaths, horses, I've got the rocket, Stephenson's rocket. I'm just...
Just slow down, James.
All right,
slow down.
all right.
You're headed if you go at this
all right,
rate.
all right. Carry on. Go on.
Now, had they done that, it would have been fantastic, because it would have looked as if the barges were going faster. That's the situation at the moment. We have these middlemen called telephone companies, and they're totally redundant, because once you're on the internet, you're on the internet. At the moment, none of us can access the internet without going through the middleman of this telco.
Yeah.
But once we're on the internet, we know we can do things to bypass the telco, like things like Skype and point-to-point connectivity. And what the net neutrality disruption is about is almost cementing into law the preservation of this middleman that is enabling itself to take money that actually it's doing nothing for. Let me give you an example. You know in your own home that once you've paid for all the bits of the wires and the routers and the computers and so forth, the bits go free, don't they? You don't have to pay a service for every email you send from the first floor to the second floor.
No.
That's the principle of the internet.
Yes.
But that means that the guy who is selling you a service, because, you know, you can only connect to the internet by going through one of these service providers, whereas the actual physics means that as long as you're connected to any computer, anywhere on the internet, you're on the internet. So this is very, very serious. I mean, it really... it's me being thick, Malcolm, I promise. But what's going to change then? How does this... What does this give the internet service providers the power to do? And I'm sticking by the idea that the canal has just confused things further. It enables them to say yes or no to how the internet is used.
So if I have a contract with, you know, Acme internet service provider, and I'm in America... As of this going through, they can say to me, if you want to go on Facebook, you're going to have to give me $2.
Well, they're not going to do that. They're going to go to Facebook.
Yeah.
They're going to say, hey, Mr. Facebook, we've invested in these wires. You're making gobs of money. We're losing money. We want a bit of your money.
But you make it sound...
Imagine if the electricity...
No, but that sounds a bit reasonable.
No, it doesn't.
Well,
So
someone's got to
why
pay for putting all the fibre down and stuff like that, haven't they?
But hold on.
Yeah.
Imagine, why doesn't the electricity company charge Barclays Bank more money for lighting a 60-watt light bulb than Edith down in the fish and chip shop?
Oh, we've got fish and chip shops now. Well, I don't know, because they're not allowed to.
It's a utility.
So
Likewise, on the roads, we don't charge...
so equality of access to a utility.
Absolutely.
All right.
Open access.
And who will have lobbied for this to change?
Oh, the phone companies, period. Verizon, AT&T, that's the only people. Those are the big, they are massive giants from yesterday. trying to preserve themselves to have a role in tomorrow's world, and they don't. Every other, it's an irony to me that every other industry, whether it's banking or publishing or even radio, has been disintermediated. The middleman's being taken out.
Yes.
And yet the one industry that deploys the technology, the telecoms industry, has managed to preserve itself as a middleman.
I know you've spoken a lot of sense, and I was right about the notion of it being a Trump-driven move, because he appointed someone called Ajit Pai to that FCC.
Well, I mean, unfortunately, let me just say that this is as long as governments listen to people lobbying them, it's the people who can pay the bills to have man-to-man marking down at Westminster or Washington
who get the most done. Yes.
I'm afraid I don't.
What do you do for a living? Beth, the producer, said I should ask you.
Well, I was I was one of the pioneers of the broadband era back in the 1980s, and was involved in what was the first broadband local network in the world that had a license to carry voice, video and data, years before the internet. But brilliantly, Margaret Thatcher was advised by independent academics rather than parasitic
lobbyists. Yes.
Yeah. And anyway, that was happening at exactly the same time as they were privatizing BT. And of course, had that worked, BT would have been the slowest growth stock on the market.
Grief.
I then went and formed what was the first all-fiber telecoms network in Europe, public telecoms network in Europe, a company called Colt Telecoms, which at the time of the dot-com boom was number 5 in the FTSE.
Good grief.
And it crashed, of course.
Yes.
But, amazingly, these telecom companies have the ear of government, and it doesn't matter whether it was Tony Blair or David Cameron, they have got flawed public policy. We have telecoms policy that is really serving the interests of the big boys and denying the citizens the right to use this wonderful digital technology in the way they want.
I am more concerned than I was before you spoke to me. I'm not.
You should be.
No, I am, genuinely. I'm not, and don't take this the wrong way, considering this conversation started with you saying that my very brief introduction made you nod off. I am going to allow myself to say I'm more concerned than I was. I'm not necessarily less confused.
Well, it's taken me 30 years to be regarded as something other than an idiot.
Well, I shall follow your example, Malcolm, and live in hope.
Yeah, indeed.
Top man, thank you ever so much. 11:30 is the time. I'm a big fan of simple analogies. This may not admit one, but I think in the context of news supply, this would mean that two people get charged differently for the same news or something. I don't know. Another half an hour. It's flying by. I'm thinking of doing Mystery Hour at 12. You decide. Let me know whether you want that. It would have been inappropriate yesterday while we were broadcasting from Grenfell Tower. It's 11:30. A lot of love in the room for Malcolm. In fact, quite a few people suggesting that he should have received a Ray Liotta moment. Peter Baker says, how did he not get a Ray Liotta? He practically invented the internet, for goodness sake. How did he not get a good old Ray Liotta, asks Paddy. This is a bit rude. When you get callers of this calibre and quality, what actually goes through your head, James? Because no offence, I'm sat here wondering why someone like this is listening to you. Well done, mate. Keep up the good work. I know what you mean by that, but I did do quite a lengthy introduction at the top of the hour, explaining why a few years ago I wouldn't have done this subject, and then waxing lyrical about the intellectual calibre of my callers. Indeed, I may have issued the phrase, we get a higher quality of caller to this programme than any phone-in show in the history of the radio. And Malcolm comes along to prove it, but you suggest that you're surprised by it. You should listen more, Mr. Ace. It's normal on this programme. A Mystery Hour, again, another example of where people will ring in with astonishing levels of expertise and knowledge. You think phone-in radio is just for racist taxi drivers, don't you? Mate, it's 2017. You've got to move with the times. 11:35 is the time. Net neutrality. So, just to try now to meld together what Dan and Malcolm have told us, it's clearly been done to enable the telecoms companies, which also means the internet service providers, to render the internet less equal than it currently is. And by that I mean that you and I, if I had £1 billion in the bank, would have the same access to the internet. You've got the same right to look at various sites, whether it's a newspaper site that charges or a social media site that doesn't. We all have the same right of access. And at first glance, it seems they're going to commoditise that. But it's not beyond the wit of man or the realms of possibility that I've completely misunderstood. As expected, European Union leaders have, this is some breaking news for you, have just agreed to move those Brexit talks onto the second phase. Donald Tusk, the European Council President, congratulating Theresa May in the process. Theo Usherwood is in Brussels for this, to cover this. We'll get him up in a minute and find out what this means. As I say, this is what was expected. It would have been absolutely man bites dog territory if it hadn't gone through. Nice warm applause for Theresa May yesterday, as I think Guy Verhofstadt explained, or it may have been Donald Tusk himself. If we are friendly people, and she is currently our colleague, and we want things to go well for her, and that gulf of understanding between how we are speaking about the European Union in this country now and how the European Union speaks about us is possibly the saddest element of this whole sorry saga. But good news of sorts. We move on to the second phase of talks, where it will become even clearer that the Taoiseach of Ireland has now more say over what our trading agreement with the largest free market in the world will be than we do. Well done, everyone. Mike's in Edinburgh. Mike, back to net neutrality. What would you like to say?
Hi, James.
Hello, mate.
It's going to be a headache.
What? Your call, or the removal of net neutrality, or both?
The removal. Basically, what it does is it gives the ISPs power over everything. So they can charge Facebook or Google or whoever. You want access to our network, it's going to cost you. But then again, they can come to us, the consumer. You want access to Facebook and Google, it's going to cost you.
What do Facebook and Google not currently have any financial responsibilities towards the people that provide the channels by which they reach their customers and consumers?
Well, you got to. Google's got their own ISP in the States already.
So Google will be cool with this, then, will they, or not?
Yeah. Well, they're fighting against it
because they've got so many people that use Google who aren't signed up to their own ISP.
Yes. Yeah. So basically, it's putting everything behind a paywall. In simplest terms, everything will be put behind a paywall.
And that means that but it's worse than that, because it means the ISPs can exercise a form of editorial control.
Exactly. They can. The idiot in the States, if it's fake news, they can basically say, "Oh, that's fake news. We don't want to see it. We're not going to." Even though it's probably real news, they can control it. They can.
So if you want to see what is objective and evidence-based journalism, the ISP can say you're going to have to pay for it. If you want an unleavened diet of lies and InfoWars-style madness, we can keep that free, so that for a significant swathe of the population, their only access potentially could be to stuff that's demonstrably untrue.
Exactly.
So this is almost an inevitable. Once that whole fake news thing was up and running, the idea, I know you are, but what am I school of thought, which says here is some objective evidence-based journalism, here is something that's made up, and the people on the side of the stuff that's made up call the real journalists fake news. This looks like an inevitable next step in that process. This is becoming terrifying to me.
So, but like now, anyone who has access to the internet, it just depends on what speed you pay for, but you can access all your web pages exactly the same.
But the poorer I am, the poorer I am, the less access I'm going to have.
Exactly. Less access to news. You probably won't be able to afford to access your Facebook.
And is this going to inevitably cross the Atlantic, or is there any way that on this side of the Atlantic, or indeed the rest of the world, can? Because I'll tell you one thing that's fascinating. A few of you have linked me to this. Tim Berners-Lee, who really did invent the internet, Malcolm in the City, I'll call it before the news, just sounded like he did. Not intentionally. That's
he should have got a Ray Liotta.
I know he should have got a Ray Liotta, but it's gone now, all right? That ship has sailed. I'm sorry, Malcolm. He didn't strike me as the sort of fella that would have set much store by a Ray Liotta, to be honest with you, but who knows? Tim Berners-Lee thinks this is absolutely outrageous, and he invented the internet.
It is. It completely is. It basically controls what you have access to. And okay, the FCC has passed it, but now it's going to get past the Senate vote. And that's where people are thinking. That's where people think it's going to get stopped in its tracks.
Oh, do they?
So it's all going to come down to who's going to offer the Senate. You know what the politics are like in the States.
Well, the lobbyists will be leaning, if they can get the 51 Republicans that are there after the Alabama election this week, if they can get the 51 Republicans to go for it, once again, this astonishing pact with the devil that Donald Trump has created, Republicans will persuade poor people that they are acting in the interests of poor people while demonstrably and definitively diminishing the access that poor people have to the internet.
Yep.
It's a very 2017, this, isn't it? It's a very 2017 news story, this.
Yeah, well, it's been going on for the last couple of years. Well, Obama got rid of it in 2015, brought in the net neutrality.
Because he saw that lobbyists were seeking, and telecoms companies were seeking to do what they've now succeeded in doing. So he only brought in net neutrality because of the threat of what this represents.
Yeah. It's basically access to free news. You won't have it anymore.
Oh, my days. Well, again, just to confuse the issue further, journalistically speaking, the access to free news is a little weird because journalists need to be paid. The problem is you go to some of these websites and they're making their money by selling sort of weirdo energy drinks and publishing demonstrable lies, which Donald Trump says is real news while decrying the Washington Post or the BBC as fake news. Things are going to get worse before they get better, friends. Thank you, Mike. You're right. I did get a headache. Phil says, it's not that hard, mate. Come on. Imagine if your electricity provider decided that you should pay a different tariff for electricity used for cooking versus electricity used for lighting and blocked you completely from using electricity to watch TV. And you're left with that thing, and I know this must be slightly uncomfortable listening for people who conflate Trump and Brexit, but you're left with that sense again of how can people be voting to punch themselves in the face? I just don't know. Colin is in Clapham. Colin, what would you like to say?
Wow, I don't know what to say now. So many points have been made already.
But you can do a roundup if you want. I'm still a little bit. I'm still groping around in the darkness myself, Colin.
No way. To keep it really simple, it gives the ISPs the ability to charge different prices to access different content. Or if they want to block it, they want to block it. But this already exists in some respects. If you're a Virgin TV customer and you want to access some of the Sky channels, Virgin will charge you more to access different channels.
Yeah, but they're TV channels. They're not currently. All websites are equally accessible to everybody, except the ones specifically that you have to pay for. But that decision is taken by it's usually newspapers that are behind a paywall. That's all I can think of off the top of my head.
I've been in the industry for 20 years, involved with networks, globally. So if you currently pay £15 today for your internet at home, and suddenly your ISP says, you know what, James, if you want to access Facebook, etc., it's going to cost you £16.
Yeah.
Are you really going to complain for £1 difference a month?
Well, I'm not, but the whole point is that for people, when we do this a lot on the programme, the coin that falls out of your pocket and goes behind a dirty cistern in a toilet, what coin would you, in your current financial situation, get down on your hands and knees and root around behind the dirty cistern to pull out? Plenty of people currently using Facebook and the internet for whom £1 or £2 would actually be a noticeable sum of money. We've spoken to people this week who are living on £26 a week, Colin.
Well, the other thing to remember, what everyone's forgetting, is competition. If one company suddenly increases its prices, you as a home user, for example, you'll change to a different ISP. They're all desperate to get customers from their competition. Yeah, but they'll all charge
eventually.
Well, if you look at the cost of providing access to some of this content and the way the big content providers work with the ISPs, maybe they do need to get another 2 or 3%.
So I'm looking at SmartNet in Portugal. I'm taking this in good faith. It appears to be the real deal. I haven't had time to triple check. And they already have, I believe, got rid of net neutrality. And you're looking at €5 a month for your messaging package, which should have Skype on it, some other phone apps, FaceTime, internet messaging. $5 a month for your social, for your Facebook and your Twitter and your Tinder, and it's not Tinder, is it? Anyway, but Pinterest, Instagram. $5 a month for your video. $5 a month for your email and cloud. $5 a month for your music. I already pay for my Spotify, but now I'd have to pay Spotify for Spotify and the ISP for providing me with or letting me get to Spotify. Mate, this is awful.
No, you know what it is, because if you have to build your own company, someone's got to get paid. The ISPs can't keep investing loads of money and hardly getting any money back. If you want something, you've got to pay for it. The thing is, everyone in...
Sorry, who gets free internet? Who gets free internet?
No one gets free internet.
Well, then we're paying for it.
What's wrong with paying the right price for the service you want?
These companies make fortunes already.
You know what you forget, James? You know, you're...
Well, every point you've made so far... Every point you've made so far seems flawed. So yes, £1 will be a significant sum of money to lots of people. Yes, internet is not free. It is currently paid for, and the companies that provide it make enormous profits. And yes, I think that limiting...
They don't all make profits.
Limiting out, well, no, then we're back to your competition point, aren't we? So everyone else has been queuing up to describe it as awful, and you're saying it's good because some people will make loads of money out of it. No,
I'm saying that's wrong if they charge a little bit more money for it.
But well, the answer to that is simple, because it means that people can't afford it, get horribly discriminated against. It's possible that you said something that I failed to understand, but out of all the calls so far, this is the one where I'm most confident saying, I don't think that's what happened then. If it's any consolation, James, this is lovely. From, who's it from? Lost it. Oh, rats. I think it was from someone in Devon. I've forgotten your name. How rude of me. If it's any consolation, James, I would happily pay for Mystery Hour. Everyone would pay for Mystery Hour, wouldn't they? Yeah, James in Devon, I got it right. There you go. Talking about net neutrality. Before that, let's catch up with Theo Ushwood, who is in Brussels for the expected but still important announcement. Theo, where are we? What's going on?
I'm in Brussels, and the European Council has just published its guidelines accepting that we have moved through the first phase of negotiations, Northern Ireland, EU citizens' rights and the divorce bill, and can now bounce on to phase 2, which is about trade and freedom of movement and everything that comes with it. Now, Theresa May has made very clear repeatedly that on March 29th, 2019, that Britain is leaving the European Union. But from looking at this 4-page document that has just been published by Donald Tusk's European Council, it's pretty clear that on March 29th, 2019, very little, if anything, is going to change when it comes to Britain's relationship with the European Union. Point 3, as regards to transition, the European Council notes the proposal put forward by the United Kingdom for a transition period of around 2 years and agrees to negotiate a transition period covering the whole of the EU acquiesce, while the United Kingdom, as a third country, will no longer participate or nominate or elect members of the EU institutions, nor participate in decision-making of union bodies, offices and agencies. In other words, we're going to have to obey everything that the EU sets down, every rule, every regulation, but we're not going to have any part in the decision-making process after March the 29th, 2019. That's pretty crucial. That is crucial. And then it goes on to say, and this is something that has been overlooked, that actually when it comes to negotiating a trade agreement, that's separate to Article 50 negotiations. That actually comes under something called Article 218. And Theresa May, it's been pointed out to Downing Street officials here, is in danger of thinking that by agreeing to the divorce bill, by agreeing to Northern Ireland, that somehow she will guarantee a future trade relationship. It's very clear from point 6 that in actual fact, in this document, that in actual fact, a trade agreement is completely separate. But again, sorry to interrupt you, but again, this is rabbit hole stuff, because this has been self-evident from the start to many people, and yet this curious Brexit, well, I don't know what you'd call it, ideology or delusion, has created an idea in the minds of many people that they're inextricably linked. They never were. No, you're quite right to say that, but when this 4-page document is presented to Brexiteers within Theresa May's party, it's not going to go down well. This point 6, this is the crucial bit. While an agreement on a future relationship can only be finalised and concluded once the United Kingdom has become a third country, the Union will be ready to engage in preliminary and preparatory discussions with the aim of identifying an overall understanding of the framework for the future relationship once additional guidelines have been adopted to this effect. Such an understanding should be elaborated in a political declaration accompanying and referred to in the withdrawal agreement. Very clear there that this is a political agreement, and there is nothing legally binding in Article 50, what Theresa May has agreed to, that will then bounce on to phase 2 and give her that trade deal.
No, but it is legally binding that the agreements arrived at in order to trigger phase 2 cannot be retreated from. This is where David Davis, again, things that you would have expected at any other period of British political history would have been career-ending interventions, something that David Davis very nearly muffed up last week.
Absolutely. And just also on the point, and I've just dug it out, I've literally come to this document 2 minutes beforehand. Point 4, because Theresa May says that she wants to leave the European Union on March 29th. This is another crucial paragraph. As the United Kingdom will continue to participate in the customs union and the single market with all 4 freedoms during the transition, it will have to continue to comply with EU trade policy, to apply EU customs tariffs.
But you're making, I know what you're doing.
Customs duties.
But you're making that sound like a negative. It's not a negative. That no, but you are, just by the language that you're using. You're saying about obey and have to comply. It means that we are lucky enough. We can stay in the largest single market in the world. We can stay in it for a little bit longer, but it's going to come to a crashing end. Do we know when?
No. This is the document. This isn't my language. This is the document.
No, the word. Does it say obey? Does it say obey in the document?
It will continue to comply. I said
you said obey. You said obey.
I said.
You said obey. O'Brien dismantles Usherwood. This is going viral.
No, I didn't say
You're doing a cracking job, mate. I mean it, and it's very turgid text. But the conclusions, as you've extrapolated, are basically that come March 2019, nothing really changes. Transition period is one of the things that's up for discussion, and the notion that we earn an inviolate right to a trade deal as a result of settling our responsibilities and the Northern Irish border, that's the next big wake-up call for the Brexit lobby.
That's it, James. You've done it.
No, you've done it.
That's everything that.
No, you've done it. No, you've done it.
You've done it.
No, you've done it
in a really pithy way.
You're the man. You're pithy.
You put the legalese that I've just got hold of, and you put it into succinct and pithy language.
Well, are you calling me a pith taker? You're the greatest. We love you, Theo. Come home safely. Are you going to have some moule frite while you're there?
I might do, actually. I might go and have it. And one of those very strong 8% lagers.
Do you know, I was about to say, check the ABV on the lagers before you indulge in one, because you might find yourself stumbling towards the Eurostar terminal and ending up in Strasbourg. Safe journey home, mate. Look after yourself. Oh, what a happy time this is. 11:57 is the time. In case you're wondering, because I know that for some of you this is the only exposure you get to the most bovine of Brexit opining, that what they're doing now, the absolute nut jobs, their argument now is, you've really shot yourself in the foot on Wednesday by bringing in parliamentary sovereignty, because now you've made the likelihood of a no-deal reversion to WTO rules even more likely. And these people celebrate that. So even if it were true, which is questionable, these people are still under the impression that to crash out of the largest free market in the world, 30%, this deal that they've just signed with Japan, means that 30% of the planet's GDP is now contained within one market. But to leave it without any trading arrangement at all, for these people, would be a good thing. So suddenly, the American abolition, if you will, of net neutrality, we don't get to laugh at this. We don't get to laugh at dopey Americans voting to be poorer and to be less free and to have less access to information. We don't get to laugh at them, because much as it offends some of my Leave voting friends, the links between Trump and Brexit are absolutely clear. Andy's in Kilkenny. Andy, you've only got a minute. Sorry, mate. What can you tell me about net neutrality?
Let's speak out in defence of the ISPs for a minute. If you imagine an ISP is a delivery company, James, that delivers a product to your door. So if they deliver your groceries from Tesco's, it costs them a certain amount and they have a contract with you to do so. If, however, you decide that you're going to order a big three-piece suite, then surely they're entitled to charge you more to do so. So on the internet, the big three-piece suite is something like Netflix, which uses a lot of resources to deliver. So that, I think, is the defence in them being allowed to charge more or different amounts for different things.
Because of the amount of bandwidth that's used.
Yeah. I was instrumental in setting up an ISP, and I tell you, it's a major problem in that bandwidth use is increasing in certain ways, like for example, watching movies.
But I could see, but this is a little bit different if I've understood it, and I'm a little wary of stepping into your field of expertise naked. But if I've understood you correctly, then I could see how a sort of meter for bandwidth use could be employed, but this gives arbitrary rights to...
You see, the ISPs are saying, well, why should we pay a load of money ourselves to deliver someone else's goods, like, for example, Netflix?
Yes, which is what I mean by having a form of metering of bandwidth. I could get my head around, and that would fit the logic of what you've said. But this gives arbitrary rights to the ISPs to decide what does and what doesn't get charged for.
Which is the downside, and which I don't...
It's not just a downside, it's an absolute bloody disaster.
Oh, I agree.
Oh, good.
I'm playing devil's advocate slightly because I
understood the original point. That would be like water metering, as opposed to the old days of the water rates where there was no measure at all. I get that, but that's not what the people worried about it are worrying about. Wow, I think I now understand it a bit better than I did at 10 o'clock. So my thanks to Andy and to Malcolm in the City and to Dan and to everybody else who's piled in on this.